If you asked Iranian authorities whether most people of Iran welcome a US strike on the country, they would likely deny it. They typically claim that only a small percentage of people, who have become victims of American propaganda, would call on Trump to take military action against Iran. The truth, however, is not what the Islamic regime's authorities claim. The true narrative that reflects reality is that people in Iran are effectively being held hostage by the Islamic regime and are deeply desperate for freedom. It is essential to bear in mind that the United States is the only possibly available option to which people in Iran can turn. China cannot be considered as an option, as it is the largest oil buyer from Iran and a major supplier to the country. Nor can it be Russia, which is dominant over Iran's heavy industries, particularly its nuclear and military sectors. Whether an American strike would serve people in Iran or lead to democracy is beside the point, given the country's severe and worsening humanitarian crisis. Just by looking at Iran's approach over the past 2 decades in its negotiations with the Western countries regarding its nuclear ambitions and ballistic missile program, we can see why people in Iran feel justified to appeal to the United States to overthrow the Tehran regime. There is a direct correlation between the way Iran approaches negotiations with the United States and people's wish for a regime change in Tehran with the help of the US. Even with an American naval armada including the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group positioned around Iran, and despite repeated military threats from Donald Trump, Iran has shown no willingness to compromise. Today, February 8, Agence France-Presse reported that Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had ruled out Tehran ever giving up uranium enrichment in its negotiations with Washington, insisting it will not be intimidated by the threat of war with the United States. Abbas Araghchi told a forum in Tehran attended by Agence France-Presse that, quote, "Why do we insist so much on enrichment, and refuse to give it up, even if a war is imposed on us? Because no one has the right to dictate our behavior." In fact, one day before resuming talks with the United States, on Friday, in Oman amid tension escalation, Iran reportedly unveiled its most advanced missile to date. Iran did so as a gesture of defiance to remind the Americans that they are still the same radical state determined to impose its regional ambitions, even against major powers. The very fact that Iran killed thousands of protesters across the country, and then returned to the negotiating table with the United States less than a month later while insisting that talks should be limited solely on sanctions relief related to its nuclear program conveys a single message with 2 distinct dimensions. On the one hand, it reflects Iran's rigid ideological conviction that it has the unquestionable right to kill, or even to massacre its own people without leaving any room for any external actor to comment or intervene. On the other hand, from Tehran's perspective, One of the main reasons it should always drive a hard bargain as a negotiating tactic is the fact that it holds its population of 90 million as hostage. This is in sharp contradiction to the prevailing assessment of many political analysts, particularly in Western media, as recently many superficially argue that the recent massacre of protesters in Iran has put the regime in a weaker position. While Iran continues to play the same old dangerous song, holding 90 million people hostages, it is unsurprising that many people desperately seek the United States' support to topple the regime in Tehran.